Hello, everyone that's online. Thanks for your patience while we try and work out how to host webinars. We'll just give you all a couple of minutes for more people to filter in, and then we will get ourselves underway. If you've never used GoToWebinar before, there's should be a little sort of question or a chat feature. Obviously, if you've got questions, feel free to ask questions. If you fancy being chatty, use the chat feature. We'll cover a bit of the webinar as we go through, but more than happy for you to ask questions as you go, and I'll try and interrupt the flow to get them answered relatively quickly. Maybe not straightforwardly, but all right, I'll make it 10 o'clock. We'll start with the intros, and obviously people will start to drift in over the next couple of minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you joining us from Europe. And welcome to this Amaze.io webinar in conjunction with the Lando team. We're going to be talking about simplifying development workflows with Lando and Lagoon over the next hour or so. So we're joined today by Tom from Amaze.io and Mike from Lando. We'll go through some quick introductions. My name's Toby Bellwood. I'm the product lead here at Amaze.io. So I take responsibility for mostly Lagoon and the Lagoon suite of products, and making sure that they sort of work and play nicely with others, and they still continue to deliver the kind of developer-friendly service that we're looking for. So Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, my name's Tom. I'm the APAC lead for Amaze.io. I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand. Been a systems engineer working with Lagoon for the last over 3 years now, and been heavily involved with Drupal DevOps for around about 5 years. So super excited about the webinar today. I'll pass over to Mike.
Hello to everyone out there in the world today. Very nice to be joining you. I am coming from the eastern seaboard of the United States in the greater New England area. My name is Mike. I am one of the engineers that make Lando. I work at a company called Tandem, which is a digital agency. So we do websites and mobile applications across many frameworks, but we also sort of make Lando in our spare time. Very excited to be here with the Amaze team to talk about how we can make development super easy for all who are interested.
I just had a comment that someone's having difficulty with audio video. I know some of the people are saying that they're good, so it must just be you, Chris. You must just have broken your machine. So as I've said, ask questions. There's a Q&A feature, little questions feature in the webinar. Feel free to ask us questions. I'll go through, try and answer them all. and get Tom and Mike to answer them. We're also going to be recording this, so we'll be recording it and sharing it on our blog, and no doubt Mike will also do something from the Lando side as well. So we'll make it available once it's completed for anybody that couldn't make it on the day. So what I might do is, we were going to talk, so today, the structure of today is going to be a bit of a roundtable discussion. We'll talk a little bit about Lando, Lagoon, DevOps, open source, and sort of the collaboration, and then we'll launch into a live demo of the integration, which has obviously been very diligently practiced and rehearsed and totally wasn't made up 45 minutes ago. But we will.
That's true.
I think I nominated myself to do a live demo, and now I have to run on my non-usual laptop, and it sort of threw me for a loop. So Mike has offered to step in and cover that. So what I will do is get things underway. Tom, do you want to just give us a quick run through of what Lagoon is for someone coming to it fresh?
Yeah, so not a question, but yeah, Lagoon is really, I guess it's a web hosting platform, but it's also the build and deployment system that works on top of a very well and used supported system called Kubernetes. So the idea of really building a project out inside Docker containers, being able to build them out locally, test them, develop, and then take it all the way through into a production environment, and that's through potentially like a QA testing phase, and being able to, replicate that deployment process and automate that process. So it really makes the hosting of sites super easy to build and develop with. But on the other side of this, the leveraging Kubernetes really allows it to scale up to the major use cases.
Cool. And Mike, can you tell us what Lando's all about for people that are coming to this new?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Lando is a free and open source development tool. It's primarily, probably the easiest way to think about it is it's a local development environment, but a bunch more. So the primary idea behind Lando is that, for PHP, we have Composer, and for Node, we've got NPM, and Lando sort of does a similar thing for DevOps in general. So you can think about it sort of as development dependency management or local development dependency management. And it's a tool that you can use across all your projects to get you from essentially development to some sort of production on-ramp. That might be GitHub, that might be a Lagoon instance, that might be platform.sh, could be some bare metal server somewhere. And like the fundamental idea behind Lando is that just like you have a package.json or a composer.json for your Node and PHP dependencies, you have a lando.yaml file that contains all the information that Lando needs to know about to spin up your site locally, to configure any tooling that is necessary, and then to hook you up with some remote sources so you can interact with your development environment in the cloud or a production environment in the cloud. And all of this should be contained inside of a repo, your Git repo, in a config file, so that basically you should be able to git clone a repo down and run Lando Start. And when Lando Start is done, you should have all the things that you need to develop your site, to test your site, to run tooling against your site, and to deploy your site. And that should be true regardless of whether it's a PHP project, a Drupal project, a Node project, a .NET project. It should be true whether you're on Mac, Windows, Linux, or on Circle CI or some other place that if you choose to use Lando in that sort of capacity. And it should be basically true for all your projects. So standardizing the workflow across projects and providing a mechanism to like easily specify the dependencies to run and test those projects.
One of the common threads between Lagoon and Lando is the real importance of development workflows. So obviously Lando's got great coverage for local development workflows, and one of the things that Lagoon really prides itself is a developer workflow in the cloud. How do you see development workflows, or how do you see that they've changed over the last few years, and what do you think the next frontier is for proper developer-focused workflows?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I think it has become probably quite a bit more complex. I mean, with a lot of the tooling, dependency management, a lot of these things, there's complexity that's sort of crept in over time. But you know, the best thing here is that there's actually tools and tooling now that have also been developed at the same time to simplify the use of these great tools for a lot of the automation purposes. So although the complexity has crept in, there's now solutions to sort of help you improve your development workflow this time. And it's really about sort of understanding what the lower level components are and how they help you, because piecing these together just makes your life a lot easier, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I think one of the common threads between Lagoon and Lando is, you're talking about reducing complexity. I think that's a big part of it, and then reducing complexity behind a standardized interface. So you can reduce, like, project A may be very different from project B, but reducing the complexity of those and being able to run the same kinds of commands with the same kind of workflow, regardless of sort of those lower level concerns. That's definitely a big thing. I mean, one of the trends that I think's happened increasingly over the last 5 years is, 5 years ago it was very common to find a shop that maybe was standardized, basically only did Drupal projects and maybe launched 95% of their sites on one hosting provider. Like, that is very rare now, and it's not going to go back that way. It's going to continue to get more complex. So agencies and teams, they're having to wrangle with more complicated solutions, decoupled sites, node projects, Drupal projects. They might be deploying to like very different hosting environments. So being able to have a standardized way to do that across all your projects and to not have to worry about the differences between setting up project A and project B, I think that's a huge win. I think both Lando and Lagoon provide a lot of that complexity reduction and standardization.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Mike. I mean, Lagoon, this is really where Lagoon shines, because it's really not focused on a single framework. It's really making it, as flexible as possible in a container-based environment to really use what is necessary, but standardizing that workflow. So, the same way to create routes to your CI pipelines all the way through to, running in production is standardized potentially across all of those different technologies.
The question we've just got in is how is Lando different to using Docker, pure Docker, for spinning up a local development environment?
Yeah, so Lando actually uses Docker under the hood, and if you've ever tried to use just Docker by itself to do local development, you can get fairly far using just that, but it becomes very complicated very quickly. So obviously, the more services you add, the more complex it gets. When you try to do cross-platform, it gets more complicated. So you can think about Lando as sort of again, like to latch back onto the theme of sort of reducing complexity. Lando does a lot of complexity reduction. So even if you consider Docker Compose, which is obviously much easier to use than Docker by itself, Lando sort of takes that a step further. So you can think about Lando as sort of a superset of Docker Compose, but also an abstraction layer. So we collapse, here are the 5 most important things that you need in your config file. You don't have to worry about all this other stuff. Although if you want to worry about that, you certainly can override that. We allow that potential as well. And you can also think about it as a sort of a Docker Compose utility. So we make it very easy to do sort of like cross-application networking, which is sort of tricky to do out of the box. User permission handling across operating systems is a tricky thing that happens. We have a proxy built in, so if you want to like get nice URLs to route to your projects, that's like another thing that we can do. So, if you like Docker and Docker Compose, like, it's great. You should keep using them. We've found that, like, as your teams get bigger and the application requirements get more complex, something like Lando is nice because it does a lot of the stuff out of the box. You save a lot of time in that initial onboarding, and you save a lot of time in maintenance in long term. So I would think about it as just sort of extending that pattern from Docker to Docker Compose to Lando.
We'll cover a little bit how this project sort of evolved and how it fits with Lagoon's view of local development in a little bit. But we've sort of touched on making sort of life easier, automating a little bit. This sort of dovetails nicely into sort of DevOps strategy. Why do you think DevOps is so important, and why is it so important to try to get it right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's really a mindset from what I believe. It's not really a specific role in things, and it's really the idea, the overarching concepts about basically getting an idea into production as efficiently as possible. So it's all the concepts and things behind that, and it's a real benefit for the whole team, not necessarily a single person in the team, to understand how you can increase that efficiency. Because even as a 1-person team or a 10-person or a 100-person team, if you increase that efficiency, you can reduce errors, and you can obviously increase the team velocity and deliver more things. So it's really about how to find those areas for improvement, and you can start small. There's no reason to think, go from nothing to a full CI pipeline with automated regression testing and automatic updates and everything. It's really about starting somewhere to make sure that you get those efficiency gains over time. And it's an ongoing process. It's very, very fast moving. So this is where the tooling really, really helps. So things like Lando that comes in, and we all know, Docker's moving so quickly. In the last 5 years, Lando really takes that complexity out, and sort of as a collaborative open source project, really balances over a lot of other users some of the complexities that are underneath. So working in an open source community as well, you can obviously collaborate with a lot of other people to extend and improve your DevOps strategies.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot. I'm just going to repeat exactly what Tom said if I do say anything. So I might as well just say I agree with that, and we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I think totally that I fully agree that DevOps isn't a job. It's a strategy or a mindset, or it's something that you continually try and improve on.
Yeah. The ideal DevOps is that you just edit the site directly on production and hope that you make no mistakes, and that like no one's gonna hack your site, and like no one's gonna have to review your changes beforehand. Like this would be the ideal world. I think that you can just do that and there are no problems. But I think it's very easy to just immediately see like where the problems are how problems are gonna arise if you do that. So I think once you just accept, to me, like DevOps extends basically just from this fact, that like we cannot do this successfully for a various number of reasons, and as a result, we have to sort of put guards in place and all these other mechanisms to make sure that we arrive at a result that we all think is good. So to me, that basically is like that's the kernel that like all of DevOps erupts out of, the Pandora's box, if you will. And it is Pandora's box because you really are letting out all of this. Once you make that concession, you're letting out the chaos of the DevOps possibilities. And I think that's why things like Lagoon and Lando are good, trying to bring order to that chaos. Once you open the box, it's very difficult.
Yeah, we all remember FTPing stuff up to prod and crossing your fingers and hoping it worked. I think tools like Lando and Lagoon give you a lot more confidence that it works on my local. It works in a development environment in production. I can be really confident in like whether we get to 100 deploys a day, whether we get to 1 deploy a week, having the confidence that my deploy is going to happen the way I expect it to, and I'm not going to get a surprise, I think is crucial to be able to unlock that greater mindset.
And I think that dream you talk about, Mike, with a 1-person team, I mean, if you're a 1-person team that's doing the development, the testing, and the releasing, you can go and edit it on prod because you could be pretty confident that you're right. But as soon as you start introducing another developer, you all want to really be on the same page, and it becomes really important to make sure you're not overstepping on each other. And this is where it brings into the concept of GitOps, which is obviously a philosophy Lagoon strives to, and Lando, where that everything has a single source of truth. So no matter what people are working on, where or what time, they're able to rebuild, test, and deploy with confidence.
One of the things that we've touched on a couple of times is the open source aspect of things. Now, both Lagoon and Lando are fully open sourced. Can you talk about the different sort of decision-making processes behind taking products open source and working in the open?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been, one of the things I found Lagoon really in the early days. I mean, I saw this hosting platform that was open source, and I was like, wow, that's just amazing. And I've been involved in open source for many years, and I think there's huge benefits around that because you effectively can start working and collaborating together on ideas. And I think this is really the power of that open source community that not only leverage the tools and the actual resource themselves, but you actually can share and collaborate on new features and designs and things like that. So for these sorts of things, I think the more people that use it, the more use cases you're encountering, the more stable and more performant it becomes. So open source for these sorts of purposes is really, really beneficial. And I know, seeing also the huge Lando community heavily involved in being able to, find issues early on, making sure that, we work together and that sort of smooth outcome is achieved.
Yeah, I mean, I think, going back many years, we made a decision that, what at the time was called Calabox would be free and open source. So, once you made that decision, I think you're sort of stuck with it. There are tons of benefits to open source. I think most of the people on here probably understand what they are, since we all sort of interact with the open source community. I mean, Lando has over 200 contributors. We've got a Slack channel with a few thousand people in it. They're all helping themselves all the time, which is great. Lando is not part of our business model at Tandem. Really, it's not something that really is making tons of money. So there was some necessity for it to be open source, I think. We just need to have need to have other people who can help other people sort of for free. So the open source part of it was like definitely very important without the monetization component, I think. And philosophically, I think like development tools, like people want to understand like, what am I installing on my computer? What is it going to do? I think this is like very important for sure. But I mean, there's a lot of difficulties associated with open source as well. I mean, beyond just, once you make it open source, it's so difficult to monetize it. But it also requires some level of quality to your stuff. If no one sees what's going on behind the scenes, I feel like you can get away with quite a bit more. So to me, that's like one of the major. That's been one of the things that's been more difficult for us. Like it demands a higher level of rigor. But I think that's good. It's good to know like exactly what you're getting.
Yeah, and I think from a business point of view, if you're laying a stake on something, I mean, being open source and having multiple people being involved and collaborating is far less risky than sort of putting all your bang into one company to survive in the long haul, especially when things are changing so fast.
One thing that obviously, for those who've been following Lagoon closely for the last sort of 3.5 years, Lagoon already has a local development tool called Pygmy. For those that know and love Pygmy, they know and love Pygmy. Pygmy is pretty close to native Docker Compose. It adds a couple of extras for local dev on. What was behind the decision for Amazee.io to pursue an integration with Lando? What sort of spurred that?
Yeah, I think the original conversation was around just some of the, I guess, the usability features of Pygmy. It is, like you say, quite a basic tool. It really provides just a couple of helpers on top of Docker Compose to really improve your startup and development process. But Lando really takes that to the next level. So if we're talking about those layers that we discussed before about you have Docker, you can extend that with Docker Compose to make it easier. Pygmy would sit just above that, and then Lando takes it all the way. So it wraps around tooling like Composer, npm. I think from a usability perspective, we hope that it's more of a feature-rich, polished solution as an option for people to use with Lagoon.
We also would have accepted because you all are the best as your answer.
Too easy.
Yeah, I think one of the things that one of the trends that we've seen for sure, we've done like a few integrations besides the Lagoon one at this point, and we're working on some more right now that we hope to announce fairly soon. But I think one of the things I think one of the assumptions that many like hosting companies and other enterprise people have about local dev is, oh, it's not that difficult of a problem, and it is. It actually is very difficult. And if you're a hosting company, like you don't want to be spending tons of dev cycles working on a local development solution that only works on your thing. You want to be spending that working on your open source hosting platform. And even doing local development for your narrow use case is very difficult. Like cross-platform is difficult. So like a whole bunch of parts of it are very difficult. And the problems are, even though it's containers sort of on both sides, the problems are actually very different. So just because you can run a containerized hosting platform doesn't mean that you can do local development particularly well. So don't be confused that they're the same problem. And I also think that one of the nice things about Lando is, with the amount of users that we have now, like it's fairly battle tested. Like that's not to say that it's perfect, of course, because we're always finding like new ways that users mess up their computer. Which is one of like the fun things about local development that you don't have on the hosting side. But there's been a lot of users. I think it's like hit some level of scale. We've been able to iron out a lot of the kinks. So like there's just a more stable thing that you're building your thing on at this point, and that just seems like to bring it back to open source. That's sort of an open source pattern, right? Like got an open source solution that gets you 85% of the way there. Like why are we doing this 85%? Let's just focus on that 15% that like takes us from that to our own local development solution. So, it really is just following a pattern that we're all familiar with, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's a great point there as well, as the fact that, Lando is bigger than Lagoon. I mean, Lando is very well heavily used outside of Lagoon. So it's about people familiar with this tool set, understanding it, being able to easily come on board and just know that it works the same way. So that standardization model for onboarding people, for also, if developers are joining the team, having that single standard way to provision something, even if you're using multiple hosting solutions, improves, the team velocity immensely for that.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier in this webinar, it's increasingly rare that someone's going to be, deploying against only one target. Like that's changing. People are doing multiple targets, and Our opinion is that like developers generally don't want to have to use 5 different local development tools. They prefer to just use one. So, if you're only doing Lagoon, then like Pygmy, obviously like great solution. But if the minute you go outside of that, it's nice to have something that you can rely on. That's like, okay, I can use Lando across all my projects. I don't need to have Pygmy and MAMP and Drupal VM and, Pantheon's local dev, which is built on Lando, of course, but I don't want to have all of these like 4 things. I just want to have the one thing.
So, I mean, we sort of underlined the decision-making process. Can we run through a little bit how the collaboration and the partnership between Lando and Amazy.io has worked? Obviously, I've been heavily involved in this as well. It's been probably 12 months since we had those sort of first conversations, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we've worked this, particularly in an open source sponsorship, partnership, collaboration, because I think this is a really kind of unique partnership here.
Yeah, and a funny story there. I think it all started actually in a gondola sitting in Zurich, the Zurich Amazy Labs office, where I caught up with Mike and I said, hey, we're just thinking about spitballing ideas around what we're going to do with Pygmy. Do we develop that further? Are there other options? And Mike's like, yeah, I mean, let's have a chat. And that's really where it kicked off. And so, from that point on, we've sort of worked in terms of what sort of feature parity looks like between Pygmy and Lando. And there's some, trade-offs, I guess, we've had to make, because there's, the simplicity versus complexity along the way. But I think we've really had a good outcome to get to this beta phase. It's definitely been a great collaboration, catching up with Mike every now and then and pushing those boundaries and getting the testing, and yeah, I've really enjoyed working with you guys over the last 12 months or so.
Yeah, I feel like we've known the Amazy team or the people who now comprise the Amazy team for a long time, and these have been like casual discussions that I think that we've had for many years now. You know, and like talking about the same kinds of problems too. So, you know, I felt like it started out as sort of like, you know, commiserating and lamenting the state of things and how we wish we could be better. And then, you know, at some point it was like, oh, if we just do this, we can make it better. So very exciting. You know, it's been particularly nice for Amazy because with Amazy because I feel like there's a lot of shared ethos, particularly around the open source nature of the two things, and fundamentally how both Lagoon and Lando work. Like the match was very good. So like building some of the other, you know, integrations that we've done certainly have been much more complex, I think, without necessarily providing a lot of extra things compared to the Amazy one. So it's been very nice at how, you know, it was very much, you know, square peg, square hole, which is nice because it's normally not quite like that. So.
Well, I mean, particularly what I've liked is that we've been working for the last sort of 6-9 months, and Lando's open source. I managed to contribute part of our own integration back to Lando. So if it breaks with Postgres, it's probably my fault. But for me, that's a really nice aspect to the proper open source partnership. When we go into open source partnerships with vendors, suppliers, etc., I really like the two-way sharing. Yes, we are a sponsor of Lando, and we could very easily say to Mike and the team, go away and build us something cool. I'd much prefer to be involved in that and to help, whether I helped or hindered. Mike's never been truly truthful about, but
shall we announce it today in front of all these nice people?
But yeah, being able to be involved in the companies and the tools that we work with, something that's really important from our point of view, and it's the same from Lando's. It's like open source partnerships are a two-way street. So I'm really excited that we could do that.
Yeah, and it's absolutely right. Because
Toby, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, it's absolutely right. It's been, you know, it's a two-way process, and the reason why, if anything, it's taken a bit longer than we'd planned is the fact that we've actually been making improvements on our side as well. It was not just about a collaboration to make Lando work with Lagoon. It was about making sort of both tools better at the same time. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, trying to build something when they're both moving targets is difficult. So like, I would pat ourselves on our backs for that. And also kudos to Toby, because not only did he help contribute some of the code to it, but he also wrote tests for it, which is like sort of unheard of. So massive props to Toby for that.
I spent all yesterday writing a full suite of tests.
I will take your comment about Postgres, and if that ever breaks, I will immediately blame you.
Yeah, side shout out to Leah, which is a testing framework that the Lando team built to test Lando. It's the easiest testing framework I've ever used. Yesterday, I wrote 18 different tests in Leah for one of our other projects, and it's just so nice. The fact you can get me writing tests, job done. Now, I've been nagged by a couple of people to stop talking and to start showing stuff. So I suspect I should probably hand over the presenter reins to Mike, who's going to run us through what the integration looks like and go through an absolutely faultless start to finish dev workflow.
Yes. Let's see. All right. Let's proceed. Cool. So I think hopefully everyone can see my screen decently enough, but I've got just like a terminal open, and I've also got a text editor open, so we can look at both of the things. I've already installed Lando, so I'm not going to go through all of that. But if you have not installed Lando or interested in installing Lando, just go to lando.dev or the GitHub page, github.com/lando/Lando, and you can find a package installer and just download it, double click on it. You can just step through it like any other application that will install it for you. So I've done that part already. So what we're going to do is like demo the integration with Amazy. This follows pretty much the same pattern that we have for all the other integrations. So that's one of the, I think, again, going back to the standardization point, this flow is essentially the same for all the other providers that we connect to. So Lando is a command line tool. You just run Lando, you get a bunch of things that you can run. We'll go through them a little bit, but I want to sort of demo the main things first. So generally, the idea with Lando is when you're talking about integrating with something like Lagoon, is Lando will handle the authorization with that hosting provider. It'll do any necessary like key exchange that has to happen, and give you a list of your projects. You can pick a project, it'll clone the project down, and then you can go ahead and run the Lando Start on that project, and it will spin up all the things that you need. And then usually there's a Lando Pull and a Lando Push command. Lando Pull is the one that I'll show, but that will also connect to the remote Lagoon instance and pull down the database and the files for your project as well. So to begin, we will do a Lando Init. Oops, Lando Init. You can see here there are many different like sort of sources you can choose. We'll obviously pick Lagoon. I've already authorized this previously, but if you haven't authorized yet, it'll be an obvious workflow for you to go through for you to add your Lagoon SSH key. So put in the thing. I have these three nice Lagoon sample projects that Toby and Tom set up for me. So we will try just the 999 Lando project. And again, other good thing to mention too, like everything in Lando is running in containers, and all the containers that you have are determined on a per project basis based on the Lando file that you have in your repo. So the only tool that you need to do all of the things that I'm showing right now is just Lando. So if you just install Lando, you'll have all the things that you need. It'll even automatically install Docker for you. So you can see right here that it's grabbing my project and cloning it down. And when this is done, I should have my code base locally. One thing that is worth mentioning as well is the speed with which all of these things are happening is going to be probably slower than if you did them on your own computer, and that's mostly because the demo of this plus the webinar is like causing my computer to almost burn a hole in my desk. So slight caveat there. You're getting the bare, but probably like you're getting a level of performance that I don't think is not reflective of the normal experience, but it should still be pretty quick. So we can see right now, if I just do like a basic list, you can see here's my Lagoon project. It's been cloned down. If I switch over here, I can see here's sort of the code in my code editor. We'll come back and look at this in a second, but after I do that, the next step is to just do a Lando Start. And what Lando Start will do is it'll grab all the containers, it'll grab and build all the containers that I need to run the project locally. It'll also set up any tooling that I need for the project. So that could be in this case, that would be like Drush, for example, or in Composer and PHP and the MySQL utility. And it'll also like do the build process that I have. So for this site, that's just a Composer install. But it's very easy to configure more complex build processes. So if I had like, if I wanted to compile SAS or something like that, it's very easy to do that as well. So while this is going through the build, I'll move back over here. So if you're familiar with Lagoon, obviously you have like your lagoon.yaml and your docker compose.yaml. One of the really nice, this is the Lando file for this Lagoon project. As you can see, it's fairly simple. Normally a Lando file, let me see if do I have a good example to show another one? Yeah, I think I do. So normally, this is the Lando file for our company website, for example. Normally it looks something like this, where you have to set like particular proxying routes, and then you set up different services. So like here's a couple of node containers that run our doc site and our main site. Here's like a PHP thing to run, I think in this case, the platform.sh CLI, and then like various tooling commands. So I would describe this as like a moderately complex Lando file. Certainly they can be simpler than this and more complex than this, but I bring it up only to show you that one of the nice things about a Lagoon recipe by default is you get this as your starting point. Very, very simple. And the reason why we can do that is because Lando is smart enough to see, oh, this is a Lagoon project. Why add extra configuration to this file? Why not just read from the lagoon.yaml and its docker compose.yaml and figure out what to do based on that? So that's very nice. That means,
just on that one, it's really important because obviously with the lando.yaml, you'd have to actually keep that in sync with your hosting provider. Whereas within Lagoon, this is a single place, a single version of the truth. This is exactly what's running locally as what will be running in potentially a CI and production environment. So.
Yep, that's exactly right. So this is very good. Now you have a single source of truth, and it's basically your production configuration. So that means that locally, like we're running the exact same images that like are running on Lagoon. There's going to be there'll be some small changes, but they're changes that are only relevant for local. For all intents and purposes, this is production parity. So that's very nice. So that means that if I wanted to go in here and change, this to change my local environment to run Postgres instead of Maria, I just follow the Lagoon instructions and do that and do a Lando rebuild. And then when it comes back up again, I'll have Postgres instead of Maria. So very, very nice. Like you can, this works two ways. You could have somebody change the configuration, the Lagoon configuration, push it into the main branch or whatever your head branch is, and then you can pull that down and do a Lando rebuild and get those changes. Or you can also say, doing that is sort of slow. I have to wait for Lagoon to rebuild everything and whatever. I can just like test all of that locally first and see what happens. And if that checks out, then I can push it. So you really get sort of a two different ways that you can sort of do that. But the single source of truth is the key, and that it's Lagoon and not Lando is the important point. So very, 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 very nice there. So to switch back, so we've finished spinning up the site, doing the build process. So we should have a fully baked code base at this point. Ignore this warning. This is because I'm running Lando's just telling me that I'm running an unsupported version of Docker Desktop because I'm also running an unsupported version of Lando because it's the development version, which adds a little extra excitement to this because who knows what's going to happen. But you can see here, like here's all the services that Lando will spin up for you. If you look at them, like these names match up with the names that are in the Docker compose.yaml. So it's the same thing. And you get these like nice URLs as well. So if I wanted to like go check out the site, it'll load up. It'll give me the Drupal install screen because I haven't pulled any files or database down yet. So we will let's spin up a different. Let's do this simultaneously, I guess. So.
One of the questions was if you're doing the initial Lando Init, it brings up the list of options, so Platform SH, Pantheon, Lagoon. That appears to everybody who does a Lando Init. They'll only be able to go further with a Lagoon project if they've already got Lagoon credentials.
Yeah, it's a good point. The first, I didn't show this step because I've already authenticated against Lagoon, but you need to have a Lagoon account and ideally a project in there, otherwise you're not going to be able to pull anything down. So this does assume that you have a project in Lagoon, in some Lagoon somewhere in the world. If not, then you're not going to be able to do that initialization. However, if you have like a repo that is not deployed to Lagoon yet and have the correct Lagoon files in it, you could just clone that down and start it with Lando, and that would work too. You just wouldn't be connected to any remote instance. So you wouldn't be able to do the database pull or the init that I'm showing right now.
The example of all of our Drupal examples that are up on our Amazing.io Git repos now have Lando YAML files baked inside them. So yeah, anybody can clone that and run a Lando Start, and it will fire up that project on your local in Lando, ready for when you sign up to Lagoon and become a Lagoon customer.
So I'm gonna showcase the Lando Pull command, which will grab my database and my files. And while that's happening, we can go through some of these other commands as well. So I just do a Lando Pull, and it should give me a list of the environments that I have on the Lagoon instance. So in this case, I'm going to pull from this main environment, pull the database from the main environment. That's going to ask me where I'm going to get my files. Same thing. And now Lando will do a lot of the nice things under the hood. So when this process is done, I should actually have a replica of that Lagoon environment on my computer. So the 5-minute TLDR on getting a site running is, I can get a new laptop, I can open it up, the operating system is installed, I can install Lando, I can run Lando Init, put in my Lagoon credentials, do a Lando Init, do a Lando Start, do a Lando Pull, and I should be able to basically go from new computer to, my site, my remote environment is running on my computer, 5-15 minutes, depends how big your site is, depends how good your internet connection is, those relevant factors, but pretty quick. Don't need any other tools. So I think that's sort of the nice thing. To bounce back over, you can see that if you've used a tool like Vagrant, a lot of the commands here will be familiar. So we've got like notions of start and stop and restart and rebuild. Rebuild is the command you'll want to run if you change the Docker Compose configuration or change the Lando configuration. And then we also have Lando doesn't just spin up the infrastructure that you need to sort of run your things. It also provides containerized tooling. So you can run Lando Composer, Lando Drush, Lando Lagoon, that's the Lagoon CLI, Lando MySQL, Node, NPM, PHP. So you really should have all the tools that you need containerized to run this site. So if I do like a Lando, PHP version, that should return 7.4, which of course matches up with
in the Docker file,
Lagoon
folder.
Oh, in the Docker file. Yeah, good call. Yeah. Sorry. So that would be from here. If I were to go in and change this to like 7.3 and then do a Lando rebuild and then run this command again, I would get 7.3 as the PHP version. So that's one of the nice benefits of this too, is you're providing like version lockdown for your tooling commands, which is very nice because managing multiple versions of PHP across projects, managing multiple versions of Node across project, like you can do it, but it's not the best experience, and this sort of just does it by default. So a nice win there. If I want to run like composer commands, I've got Lando Composer. Let's see what the status of this is. Oh, so it's already finished. That's good. So yeah, so I've got Composer here. Now, if I want to import a database, I've got Lando MySQL. I also have these nice utilities for automatically importing and exporting databases. Running Drush commands, again, using the Lagoon CLI. All this stuff just comes out of the box. Once you run Lando Start, you've got all these things. If I want to do the Lando SSH, that will actually drop me into, by default, that like the app container. You probably, if you've used Lagoon before, you might recognize what this looks like. It's sort of the same, again, the same image that is running on Lagoon. I can go and I can do stuff like that. So those are like the main things that you can do. Let's of course give me a good time to do pull the database down. So just do a Lando Drush CR. So this is Drush running inside of a container. The experience is basically the same as running Drush natively. You just prefix it with a Lando. Some people who don't like to type Lando out, they'll make an alias like just to L or something short, so I don't have to do it. If we go back up now to, do I still have it? No, it's in this one. To our list of URLs. I should be able to get the site show up, wait for the caches to rebuild. We've also got Mailhog support out of the box. So if you want to like capture email, like you can just click on the Mailhog link here and you've got Mailhog running, so you can try that out. Here's my site. looks really good. I made this site from scratch, as you can tell. I'm very big into vegetarian food, so I made this.
It's good to make it multilingual as well. It's nice.
Yes, I didn't. I wrote all that content as well.
It's a lot in 25
a bit
minutes.
of a linguist as a side hobby, you know. So I think that's the overview of Lando. If you've used Lando and you're familiar with like some of the power tools like build steps or tooling, you can still do all of that stuff on top of your Lagoon stuff too. So if you want to grab some extra things like a node, you know, a node project, or you want to spin up a front end or something like that, those are all things that are possible still. Yeah, but you've got access to sort of the entire tool chain. Again, just the Lando Start will get you all the things. You've got Yarn, you've got the Lando Push and Pull, PHP, NPM, Node, MySQL, the Lagoon CLI, Drush, Composer, all of it's containerized. So I can like very easily, I hope there's nothing else we want to show, because I can very easily do Lando destroy and it's all gone. It's all gone. It never existed. But I can also very easily just do a Lando Start and get it all back in a few seconds, do the Lando Pull again, and I'm back rolling. So really easy to trash these environments, spin them back up again. And that's very nice, because like you don't have to worry about, you know, oh, I deleted Composer, like how did I install that again? Then I gotta go through it again. It's like just Lando Start, Lando Stop, Lando Destroy. Tooling's there, tooling's gone, tooling's there, tooling's gone. Very fun.
So a couple of questions about running multiple Lando stacks locally at the same time. Yes, yes, you can run multiple projects simultaneously. So if you're running 3 different projects, you can spin them all up in Lando individually at the same time and have them all operating completely independently of each other.
Yep, very key point.
Bad practice. It may put a bit of a load on your machine if you do too many. I've had 5 simultaneous, so.
Yeah, it certainly will depend on how good your computer is, what other things you have running, how big each one of the sites are. But try that with 5 VMs and see how far you get, I think is probably the key takeaway. So because these are all using containers under the hood, we have the flexibility to have different infrastructure for different projects, as opposed to having one big, you know, monolith VM that has a single set of requirements. We have to put all of our sites on top of that, or we have multiple VMs that we use for separate projects. And basically the improvement in scalability and efficiency and spin up time is close to an order of magnitude, I would say, on average. So get a lot of the same benefits of containers. And you can see, I mean, right. What I just showed is a good example, right? If we were to have trashed a VM and spun a VM up again, that would have taken a lot longer than destroying it and spinning this up, which I think took, you know, probably less than a minute. So yeah, we're basically right back where we started.
If you start using the sort of the stop command as well, I mean, that's just basically stopping containers and starting them. It's seconds, rather than, you know, even less than a minute. It's super fast.
Yep.
Someone else has asked whether Lando Lagoon basically pipes commands straight to Pygmy. No, it doesn't. There's no interdependency between Lando and Pygmy. Pygmy's a more Docker Compose native way of doing things. You can't run Pygmy and Lando at the same time because they both want to occupy port 80, basically. So you either have to bring Lando down to run Pygmy or run Pygmy down to run Lando. There is another version of Pygmy out there that has selectable ports that can run both at the same time if you're that way inclined.
So I believe that you can run both Pygmy and Lando simultaneously, as long as you start Pygmy first and then run Lando. So Lando, the Lando proxy sits on port 80 by default, but when we spin up for the first time, Lando will scan to see what ports are available, and if those ports aren't available, then it will assign the next best port. You can also configure that functionality if you want to as well. So the other way around, I don't know. If you start Lando and then start Pygmy, that
it doesn't work the other way around.
Okay, yeah. So, but there's no interdependency between Pygmy and Lando. Lando is completely, all you need is Lando. You know, you can get all the things that I've shown set up. So they should be looked at as you know, I guess complementary. Sorry, as a substitute goods, I would say.
It's important that Pygmy isn't end of life. Pygmy is receiving minimal support. Pygmy is written in Ruby, and it's something that we don't, we're not doing much development on at the moment, because it kind of works out the box. It's a relatively simple tool. It does a relatively simple task. We will continue to support it, and there's a lot of use cases that Lando isn't the right tool for the job. If you want to sort of customize a lot more Dockery type stuff, then you're definitely heading into Pygmy territory, or even like just native Docker Compose land. So yeah, importantly, we're not end of lifing Pygmy. In fact, we're actively working with the community on the next generation of Pygmy. It's a tool called Pygmy Go that we may have talked about a few times, but it's really worth checking out. We'll post a link when we do the wrap up to this. But it's a very different market to Lando for us. We see Lando as being much more developer friendly, a much more easy entry point into Docker, containers, and Lagoon, whereas Pygmy is more of a power user choice, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well put. I think that's really the difference. Is that, I mean, I would use Lando just if you can. There's sort of like recommended being user friendly and easy to use, but you probably know the point where things might you need to push the boundaries a bit further. You may never hit that point, but it's sort of, we're still using Pygmy for those use cases where you just get a lot more fine-tuned control over very advanced projects.
I would be remiss to not point out that like you actually can, any service that is running in Lando can be configured down to the Docker Compose level. So like there is a lot of users do that. We have an override system, and so if you want to tap into that like Docker Compose level, that is 100% doable in Lando. So I don't want to give the impression that this is not a power user tool, because it certainly is a power user tool.
If you're a Lando power user, yeah, we can meet your needs here. Lagoon, I mean, this Lagoon integration's been available since version 2 point something of Lando. It's gone beta in the last release, but most recent versions of Lando support Lagoon in some way. As always, I would suggest that you upgrade to the most recent one just to make sure you get all the latest and best features. But Lagoon is fully supported in Lando as of the last 10 or 12 releases, definitely. We've had a request to see the Lagoon UI, and I know we're on Mike's computer. I think he's logged into Lagoon somewhere, but very quickly, in Lagoon, you can see your projects, and it'll show which projects. Mike's only got access to the 3 Lando ones that he's been using, but in any of those projects, you can see the individual branches that are being built. You can see which Git repos they're building from. And in those environments themselves, you can view sort of all the various Lagoon related stuff. So the source, the routes, you can see whether deployments have worked or failed. You can see the logs of those deployments. Might be too long ago to see the logs for those, but yeah. But yeah, you can run backups, and you can do download the backups and databases and things from there. We've also got some tasks. The Lagoon UI is a work in progress. We're doing a lot of work on it to try and make it a bit more user friendly as we go through. But yeah, it's really trying to promote that branch oriented thing. So you can have multiple branches. You can see all the branches inside the project. Each branch gets its own route. You can delete, create branches. You can access them. It's simple but functional, I think, is where we're at the moment.
So yeah, so Mike's just showing here, this is the exact same environment, same branch, with your local and remote. So, you know, when he pulled that database, pulled the files, he was basically replicating that remote environment down to his local machine.
Yeah, so this is the site, this is the main environment locally, and this is the main environment on Lagoon. So as you would expect, they're the same.
If he made a change to this site on Lagoon and wanted to get that into his local, he's got a couple of options. He can obviously do the Lando pull it straight into Lando. You can generate an ad hoc on-demand backup and download that database backup to your local and import that straight into Lando if you wanted to do it that way. But yeah, there's multiple ways of getting that from production into local.
There's also like in the Lando docs, and I think somewhere on the Lagoon docs as well, that it talks about some of the stuff that Toby's describing here, how to sort of get your sites and install them and get them set up. So if you're interested in trying it out, this is probably a good first place to go. I think that there are some Lagoon services that are not currently supported, so you've got a list of the ones that are. I think the ones that aren't are like maybe MongoDB.
Mongo, Python, Node for the time being.
Yeah.
Elasticsearch, yeah.
Elasticsearch. So
if anyone wants to contribute them, it's really easy.
Yep. So basically, all the things that we just went over in this are all documented here as well. Oh yeah, here we go. Here's the unsupported services.
There was also a comment a little bit about the Lando Lagoon command. So yeah, Lagoon is the Lagoon CLI tool. So it's a CLI tool built specifically for Lagoon. It has a similar purpose to Terminus for Pantheon. You can do various things. Again, Lagoon CLI is still a bit of a work in progress. There's some logic that's a little bit backwards sometimes, but it gives you the ability to be able to access projects, access environments, set variables, do the kind of Lagoon-y stuff that you need to do. It's
importantly, things like deploying, adding, changing configuration of Lagoon. This is sort of the recommended approach to do that, rather than via the UI or anything.
I mean, we've obviously got for Lagoon, we've got a full GraphQL server, but GraphQL is terrifying. So the CLI, the CLI actually has a good backstory. The CLI was built by initially by Matt Gleman when he was he's doing some work for his Contrib Kanban project, and said, "Hey, I've built this thing to help me manage this project. What do you think?" And a couple of the developers at IO looked at it and said, "Hey, that could be really useful for us." So from that, it sort of spun out, the project transferred, and the team's been working on this for the past year to really make it, first and foremost, the best way to interact with Lagoon. Cool. If anybody's got any more questions, throw them in quickly. Otherwise, we'll start to do a bit of a wrap up. I will take that silence as complete understanding, and I will. So yeah, what other stacks can you use with Lando and Lagoon?
Currently, we have only got, I guess, Drupal support, but within Drupal, it does effectively encompass Nginx, PHP. So, I guess with a bit of a few changes, you'd be able to support any PHP-based workflow. So yeah, Laravel, WordPress, Type3, Silverstripe, the likes. But we are working, we work to actually add new recipes, but that'll also work in line with our work on Lagoon as well, about extending better support for other frameworks.
So yeah, I've got it working with WordPress. We've got it working with the Silverstripe examples as well. So yeah, as we start to add more examples, we'll make sure that we add the Lando, we'll sort of test and add the Lando integration as we go. All right. Apparently Nicole's managed to break her local testing it. If you're doing the Lando integration, if you're integrating Lando with Lagoon, it's really important that Lando knows what Lagoon project it's talking to. So, I think that's why Nicole's got a problem in the questions. All right. Thank you so much. Quick final question from Chandeep. What's the best way to convert an existing Lagoon project to using Lando? Do you just add the Lando YAML init and start? Almost. Yes. Lando also requires a set of labels to be in the Docker Compose file. So if you look at our Drupal example simple projects, you'll see that each one of those services under Docker Compose has a lando.type. So make sure the lando.type is set according to the correct type. So it's a PHP CLI Drupal, MariaDB Drupal. If you have those and you've got that Lando YAML file and you've got the project name set in your Lagoon YAML, it should just be as easy as doing a Lando Start. If you want to pull the whole project fresh down from Lagoon, you do the Lando Init.
Yeah, and if you do it the first time, the Lando Init will actually create the Lando file for you as well. So
yeah,
yeah, and it'd be good to maybe for all of us to write a blog post about the labeling system, because I don't think that we, right now, if you haven't forked from one of the Lagoon templates, so if you have an existing project that like predates those templates, it's not obvious how to get up and running. So maybe we should make a blog post that we can send out that talks about the different Lagoon labels that you can add.
Yeah, just the 3 strategies of how to do it: how to convert an existing project, how to pull an existing Lagoon project down, and the problem is you'd have to pull it down to a new repo, and you might lose all your local. You'd have your local history in split repos. But thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much, Mike, for taking time to run us through that. As I say, I've been working on this for the best part of a year in various forms now, and it's so exciting. It's for someone that I don't do day-to-day web development, but I build an awful lot of local development environments as I'm going through testing, and the Lando just makes it so easy to have all those tools at your fingertips, particularly when you're running multiple different stacks and projects. So it's something I'm really excited about seeing grow. And as we sort of progress further, there'll be more features coming out for the integration. We've currently got sort of full feature parity with where we're at, but we're really looking to see what the next steps are and where we go. So if you've got stuff that it can't do that you think it really should be able to do, let us know. Reach out via one of the normal channels. You can throw a ticket in Lagoon. You can go to Lando and throw a ticket. Lando's got a Lagoon label there that we'll find out about. And yeah, really interested in seeing what you do with this, how you use it with your projects, and how it's going to help you bring particularly new users to your projects on board. That's something that we really try to address with this integration.
Yeah, and if you run into any problems, on the Lando side, there's a Slack channel that you can join. If you go to the Lando docs, it's fairly easy to find. We also look at all the issues that are on the Lando GitHub channel, and I think on the Amazy side, there's also a Slack channel that you can join. Although maybe I made that up.
No, I think the Drupal Slack as well is a Lando channel and a Lagoon channel, so we both sort of coincide in the one place. But yeah, but also Rocket Chat for us, which can be found via our website.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thanks for coming along, and thanks for your questions. It's a fairly healthy dose there. Hopefully we got them all. If we didn't, feel free to reach out and we'll see if we can address them offline.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you.